it goes to Mark. Okay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. It is so great that you are listening with us right now. This is our first Catholic Strengths and Engagement Community Coffee Talk. So this is something we've wanted to try for a really long time. My number 3 is adaptability. So I am great on the spot. So Leisa and I were chatting and I said, let's just do a coffee talk and talk about CSEC and get people excited about where we're going in the future. So we are just so grateful you are with us and spending time with us. So this is just a conversation today, gang. We are going to be telling you a little bit about the history of CSEC and why we exist and why it is valuable in the faith environment. But before we get rolling, what I want to do is introduce Leisa Anslinger, who I am here with. And Leisa, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I will. And Kirsten, I realize that we're really not on brand because we don't have cups of coffee.
Oh my gosh.
But it's okay. We're taping this in the middle of the afternoon. I can't do coffee at this point.
I know.
But no, I have worked in parishes. I've worked in schools. I worked in a diocesan office. And I was introduced to Catholic Strengths and Engagement in 2005 by Father Bill Hansen, who really was the pioneer and the champion for all of this in the early years. Those of you who have read Growing in Engaged Church know Father Bill and the people at St. Gerard Magella as the case study in that book. And Kirsten, I think you and I met not too long after that. And I'd like to hear a little bit about who you are and your connection.
Well, we got to know each other. I was invited to the CSEC board back, I think it was 2011, 2012, but I was introduced to Strengths in 2009. And I was working as a campus minister and knew it would be incredibly powerful for our students, our young people. And so wrote a grant and was able to become certified as a faith-based coach. And so worked with Strengths and Engagement in that community for a number of years. And then when I decided my time was done after 11 years in campus ministry, I became what I had to arm wrestle my pastor for this one, but I became the excavator of human awesomeness at our parish.
I love that.
Because people are far less intimidated by that than they are, say, the pastoral associate in charge of Strengths and Engagement. Right. They want to know what it is. And so I worked with Strengths at our parish for a total of about 15 years. Almost 15 years. And so it has been life-changing for me, as it is for many people who are involved in it, because that's why we stay with it, because it was life-changing. And so I was invited to the CSEC board, and really it was in the very beginning stages of us really wanting to share wisdom and insights into how this was working in the faith environment. And so this is kind of what Coffee Talk is all about. You are going to see Leisa and I today, but really by no means are we the experts on any of this. We have some experience with it, and so we'll share some of our experiences. But really, we want to hear from you. CSEC is all about community. And we want to hear back from you. We want your feedback. We want your pushback. We want your insights, your wisdom, your joys and successes, your failures. All of that is important because we learn from each other. And what works for me may not work for you. And where I failed on something, it may be a great success for you. And so we won't know until we talk. And so that's really what Coffee Talk is all about. So we're glad you are all here listening with us. So you know a little bit about Leisa and I now. So CSEC started back in 2011, I think it was. Leisa, why don't you tell us a little bit more about it at that point?
Yeah. Well, you know, Father Bill and a few of the other pastors in the Diocese of Rockville Center had been introduced to engagement and to strengths in the early 2000s. And so by 2006, Father Bill was invited to put together a small group of Catholic leaders, and they invited us to come to a summit at Gallup in Omaha. And I think there were 8 of us. And from that point on, it just began to spread. The word started getting out. People started seeing the impact of building engagement, which is really about belonging. And it's about everyone having that sense that they can do what they do best, which is where the strengths connection is. And almost from the very beginning, Catholic leaders started saying, you know, we really need to be able to do this together. As Kristen, as you just said, Kirsten, you know, how do we learn from each other? How do we learn what works and what doesn't, you know, and how do we build on that? And especially in those early years, you know, can we write a small group process? Can we figure out where all of the likely connections are and make sure that we're really doing this in a way that's consistent with our theology? And that really was how CSEC came about. I remember distinctly being at the International Catholic Stewardship Council's conference in 2011 when a small group of us said, okay, we really just need to do this. And that's how it began. And Kirsten, I think you were there shortly thereafter. I think you were on the very beginning board, or if not, shortly, you know, maybe the second round of board members.
Yeah, I was. And I think one of the reasons it has been so life-changing for me, and is for many people, is that for me, it's about my divine DNA. How do I name my divine DNA? How do I name what is right with me, what God has placed on my heart? Because I've always felt like I was cut from a little bit different cloth. And so one of the things I tell the groups I work with is that the number one most common talent, I think across the world, is achiever. Number one most common. Male, female, it is the most common talent. I will give you one guess what my number 34 is. It's achiever. And so I lived in a world of achievers, and so never felt like I fit. And so this was a way to affirm really what was right with me. And it really just took off from there, because it just, I can't even overstate how valuable it was from a faith perspective to look at my life through that lens of what was right and what had God placed in me. And so I just gravitated towards all of you at CSEC and in this process. But let's pivot a little bit. I want you to talk a little bit more deeply about, why do you think this is so valuable for faith communities?
I really think when it's done well, I think it's about changing the culture of the parish. And we all know that, you know, we can say this is a program and it's going to have a beginning, middle, and end, and it's going to have limited impact. There still is going to be an impact because people's lives are touched by this. But I think when we really begin to shift the culture, and I mean, Kirsten, what you just said, multiply that by every single person in the parish and imagine the difference it makes in a faith community, and the way in which we can live our faith and grow in our faith together as a result. And there's nothing like it. You know, there just is nothing like this.
And I don't think it matters. I apologize, I'm interrupting you a little bit. I don't think it matters whether it is you are a parish staff, a pastoral council, a stewardship council, a campus ministry group, a women's group, a mom's group. I don't think it matters who it reaches or touches. It's always starts somewhere, and it starts as a spark and usually grows into a fire.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I was remembering the other day, one of the early gatherings that we had at our parish when we were first starting to explore. Our stewardship commission was the group that first began to do Strengths Finder, talk about engagement, looking at all those connections. And we had decided that we would offer Living Your Strengths groups during Lent. And just before Lent began, We had a married couples dinner a couple times a year, and there would be about 100 couples in this room sitting at round tables together. So you'd have a couple that had been married 5 years sitting with one that had been married 50 years, and they're sharing their lives together. So they asked me to do this little mini intro to engagement and strengths at this married couples dinner. And in the midst of my little mini talk, one of the men who had been introduced to strengths through stewardship raised his hand and he said, "Leisa, can I tell you something?" I said, "Sure." And he says, he says, "I was worried about this at first because I was worried that it was just going to amplify that sort of me-ism in our culture. And instead, I find myself becoming so much more patient and so much more forgiving. And I want this for everyone." And then one of the other women in the group raised her hand. She goes, "I'm with you." And she said, "I just did it." And she said, "And I discovered things that have always been a part of me, but I never had words for it. And now I can say, I have relator. And isn't that great?" Well, there was a guy, Joe Kavanaugh, who was at Gallup at the time, and he just happened to be in town. So we had invited him to, to come. And he said to our pastor after, "Are you sure you're all Catholic? Because I've never seen Catholics like stand up and witness before."
That's awesome.
But they couldn't, it was like they couldn't help themselves. They had to
Right.
share,
Right.
this precious gift that they had been given that they wanted for everyone else.
Absolutely. And the number one thing I start every time I do strengths and engagement with a group, the number one thing I always say is, it isn't just about you learning about yourself. It's about learning that someone else sees the world differently, because we talk about the be like me disease. I talk about that a lot because often we try to convince people, if you just see it the way I see it, we'll both agree on it, right?
Isn't that true?
Let me just understand that you see things from a really different perspective.
Right.
And that's good and it's valuable. And so it's not just about learning about yourself, it's about learning that other people see the world differently. And it's a good thing. That's a very good thing. And I will echo that. We did, one of the best things I ever did was a strengths marriage group. And my husband, who was voluntold to do many and numerous things at the parish, he said, "Hun, that is probably the best thing we ever did." And it's not like we were inherently broken or something that was wrong. He's like, "I see me in a new light. I see you in a new light. And boy, I wish we would have known about this 25 years ago when we first got married." Because it is powerful. It really is powerful. So, and I think you touched on it. It's really beautiful that we really try and not see strengths and engagement as a program, but a foundation through which all other ministry flows. That's kind of one of my personal things is, anytime you treat it like a program, it's kind of like a book group, like, "Oh, we've done that, been there, done that. We're on to the next book." That's like saying the Bible. "Oh, we've read that. We're moving on from that." There is so much depth and richness to mine from this. And so I hope people will see it in that way. And I think it's important for longevity because we get a lot of questions at CSEC about success and what does success look like, and people who might be disillusioned that it didn't take root as much as they would have liked. But speak to that a little bit, if you would, for me, please, Leisa, because I know that's a big one.
Well, and before I do that, I was remembering our friend Stephanie Moore, who was part of that very first CSEC board. And she has this great image. She says, doing Strengths Finder, Clifton Strengths, without thinking about engagement is a little bit like having a whole bunch of hangers in a closet sitting on the floor. Because we do all these different little programs, but they don't hang together. And she said, we need the closet, in order to have the hangers in their place. And I think now some of us, we started with engagement and we worked with Clifton Strengths, and then maybe pastor changed, or maybe staff person changed, or maybe it just felt like it run its course. Everybody that was going to do strengths did it, and then, what do you do after that? And there certainly is some of that. There's no doubt about that. I have some thoughts about how we might, kind of turn the corner on that. But I think for those that have not yet really begun, I think we start with that. What is the goal? Why would we do this? And Kirsten, you've already named it so well. You're helping someone to know themselves. You're building interpersonal relationships differently. You certainly are impacting the life of the community. And then you have an opportunity to build ministerial teams differently. And so with all of that, there really is some great benefit to this process. For those that have been around for a while and they feel like they're stuck, I often say, first of all, we can't let go of the reality that this is very likely already touched many people's lives. And as I like to say, we can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. We wouldn't want to, that impact is already there. But I do think there are ways to reignite. I think it's, find the people that really had passionate about it, 10 years ago, and say, can we talk about this? Are there groups maybe that we didn't go to the last time around? Are there individuals who have moved into the parish that don't know anything about this? Are there opportunities to really shape the culture differently? And sometimes it's, in fact, one of the people at our parish that was one of the very first ones trained as a coach, she said one time, people are so quick to share gossip. And she said, did you hear what that person said? And did you see what that person did? And she says, I've decided that we should be sharing gratitude gossip. Did you hear what that group did? Did you hear what that person said? And so to be able to say to someone, thanks so much for offering your talent. Thank you so much for sharing your time and everything that you're passionate about. That changes the culture in the parish in really short order. And it's a person-to-person thing. It doesn't have to rely on a program to make it happen.
Exactly. I would echo that too. I just think people it can be easily discouraged when it doesn't go the way they think it should go. But as you said, you don't put the toothpaste back in the tube. It's already touched lives, and it's touched people profoundly. I mean, we're two witnesses alone, and we've seen it in every group we've worked with.
Yeah.
And so I think it is such a valuable piece for all of our parishes and our communities to incorporate and to start to build that foundation of celebrate what we do right, celebrate what's unique about our parish, about our community. And that may be something very small, and that's okay. That's okay. That's usually where things start, is really small. And so, share it, Christmas gift, share it with a pastor, share it with someone in your parish, in a leadership team, if you're on fire with it. By all means, share it with other people, because it's powerful. Good. What are some other questions that you get a lot, Leisa, when you're on the road and working with Strengths Group? What are some other things that really come up fairly often?
A couple of things, and this one of them we have not talked about at all. So this will be interesting just to see where we go with this. One of the things that came to mind for me is when we talk about engagement being a foundation, or strengths being a foundation. Of course, our faith in Jesus Christ is the foundation. The Lord is the foundation for all that we do. But this really helps people to put their faith into practice, and the more comfortable we get with that, the more likely it is that we're going to live our faith, the more likely it is we're going to give of ourselves in service, the more likely it is that we're going to evangelize and share our faith with others. And those are all the things that parish leaders are wanting to do. And in fact, there's so much concern right now about younger adults, and what are we going to do? Our young adults are leaving, and yet all of the evidence is, if young adults are immersed in a community that is really living faith boldly, they're going to be right there. A lot of young adults are looking for that. So that's one thing. The other thing that
Can I jump in? Can I jump in on that?
Yeah.
Because that reminds me of Father John Grace,
Yeah.
who is over on the East Coast.
Yeah.
He would often say, one of the worst things you can do is have a ministry list you have to fill, like a job jar. Oh, we need a volunteer for
Right.
Vacation Bible School.
Yeah.
You have to get to know people and what is on their hearts and where do they feel like they're of best service.
Yeah.
And so just because, and allow people to self-select, because I know some people have attempted to use strengths as a selection tool for ministry. Kind of an oxymoron, because you have to really allow people to self-select where they, just because someone has woo doesn't mean they're going to be a great greeter, right?
That's
And
right.
so you really have to allow that. And so Father John Grace talks about it beautifully. And I'd like to have him on for a coffee talk in the near future. But he has worked with campus ministries, and he said, the people who become most invested are the people who I've just asked, how do you see yourself fitting in? How do you see yourself sharing your gifts? Instead of saying, hey, I need a lector, or I need this or that. It's more of a question-based curiosity. How do you see yourself?
And a process of discernment.
Exactly. And so once the invitation, is out there to really answer that question, I think people can get really creative. So I interrupted you because I was so excited and I thought about that. But where were you going on your next point?
So the other thing that I hear a lot from leaders about, and this comes by way of strengths-based leadership and the domains. And you sit with a team and they plot themselves out on the grid, and 9 times out of 10, they're very, very light in the influencing domain. And people really start to kind of like have a little mini panic, about what are we going to do with this, And so one of the things is, when you look at the talent themes that are within that domain and you look at the distribution chart, all of those themes are in the bottom of the distribution. They're least frequently found to start with. I also think that we have something to learn in reflection about this, because I do think that some of those talents are ones that we tend to keep kind of at arm's length in our ministry circles. We don't want somebody with command. We don't want somebody with competition. And so we tend to kind of, keep those people at bay a little bit, and we're weaker for it. And I think that that's really important. But I also think it's important for us to realize that we can influence without those talents. And so that becomes part of the conversation is, okay, if you're really light in influencing, first of all, you probably have some parishioners out there who would love to be invited in, who have some of that woo, or some of that communication, or some of that maximizer talent, But the other part of it is, look at the impact of relationship and how we can influence the relationship. Look at the way in which we think strategically and we build our plans with, bringing others into the vision in mind, and so on. And the conversation becomes much healthier there, and just like in our own lives, we have to think about, what are the talents we have and who are we going to partner with, or how are we going to use a talent in a different way. It's the same thing for teams, but I think that it's, there's that initial reaction, especially among people who are leaders in evangelization, because in their minds, evangelization is all about influence. So how in heaven's name are we going to do this? And that certainly is something that needs some additional reflection.
You bet. Absolutely. And I am higher in influencing. I lead with relationship building, but a very close second is influencing. I have maximizer, I have woo, I have communication. And so, and so often, and I don't know if you find this in the faith environment, one of the things I have found is, people are hesitant to name their talents, especially influencing talents. But people are hesitant to say, focus on what's right with them, because somehow they're being boastful. But one of the things I love to tell people is, it is a false sense of humility if I do not also celebrate what is right with me. Of course, I can give you a dissertation on what's wrong. How much time do you have? But really, when we begin to focus on what's right, then we can tap into that incredible divine DNA that runs through every single one of us and find a good fit. Because don't you think, whether it be parish life, I don't care if it's in your work, in your business life, in your family life, it is all about fit. And so how that sense of belonging really comes from me finding a good fit where my talents are valued and honored and needed. And so, yeah, I think we will talk in the future much more about engagement for sure. But what are there any last thoughts you want to share with everybody?
Well, the thing that I became aware of as we were getting ready for this, and I went onto our YouTube channel, and people that are connected to CSEC on Facebook might not even realize that CSEC also has a YouTube channel. And we've not posted anything there for quite a while, but early on in the life of CSEC, we did something that we called CSEC Live. And we had Al Winsman and Kurt Liesfeld and Father James Mallon and Father Bill Hansen. And all of those recordings are on our YouTube channel. So if you connected to this recording by way of Facebook, you now know where our YouTube channel is, and go watch those other videos. There's a wonderful one with Kurt talking about moving from the basement to the balcony of our talent themes. And it's just masterful. And he was actually at St. Matthew's in Charlotte, North Carolina, doing a live training. This is way before anybody was thinking about hybrid, and who would have even known what that meant at that time. But there were like 50 of us that came in from all points, online. And then he had this group that was going through training, and he did this just incredible presentation, and we had the blessing of recording it, and so I think that's wonderful. The other thing, Kirsten, that you and I have not talked about, but I know all the people that are involved on Facebook, and all the people that have connected to CSEC through training and through the CSEC website. There are so many people that have this incredible passion and insight and would field questions in a heartbeat, would say, you want to get on the phone and talk, or let me share with you, my experience. And so I think not only do we want people to let us know, what could CSEC do in the future, but I think this is an opportunity to reconnect with each other and just say, some of us have been around a long time, and we may be feeling like we need to restart,
Right.
And so now's a great moment in which to do that.
Absolutely. And you've really touched on the purpose of why CSEC exists.
Yeah.
It is not to just give you, in part, it's to give you whatever the new Gallup best practices and information is around that. But really, how do we then transfer that to our faith lives, to our faith communities?
Yeah.
But really, it is a platform, it is a place about sharing wisdom, and to give you that place and that space where, like I said at the top, where we can share what went right and what went wrong, and it's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good. It's all, we're all trying, we're all learning together.
Right.
And, I would be happy to post if people want more information about the marriage group I ran. Now, do you need to use that exactly as I post it? Absolutely not. Use it however you want to use it, however it's best for your community. And if other people want to share resources, by all means, please do. So we have a CSEC website, which also has a map of lots of people doing strengths all over the country. Some of those are older pins, and we're not sure if they're still active. Some are definitely very much active, right. Because we've seen the gamut over the last, 12, 13 years of, there were archdioceses that were heavily invested in strengths engagement that aren't right now. And that's okay. There are parishes that were active that aren't, but others are springing up, and you never know where those seeds you plant are going to bloom. Often we don't get to see what blooms from the seeds we plant. And so it is just important that we keep doing this work. And this is what CSEC wants to do for everyone listening, for our whole community, is to just plant seeds and to share wisdom and to encourage you and support you in whatever way we can. So please check out the website. Check out the YouTube channel. We also have the Facebook page, which is a great sharing place where you can find lots of other information as well. So as I mentioned, we want to know what you want to hear about from us. And if there are people you know that would be great presenters or great at coffee talk, we're going to have the coffee cups next time, Leisa. Somebody's going to have,
even if there's water in the coffee
I
cup.
know. Exactly. So please engage with us. That is what we most want, is to hear from you. So Leisa, thank you so much. This conversation
This has been fun.
my heart. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love any chance I get to talk about strengths and engagement. I'm a strengths nerd, totally. I own it. But we hope to bring these to you fairly regularly. But like I said, we want to hear what everyone, what their thoughts are. So please don't hesitate to share. All right. So Leisa, again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And hopefully we will be seeing you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.